Hello to all. I'm here today on patch 0.10.1 in the Tier 10 reward carrier, the Franklin Delano Roosevelt. We're here today on the map Islands of Ice. Mode is Domination, and we are top tier. Now we're in the Monster of God, the FDR, although personally I find her to be somewhat overrated, but we'll get into that as the replay progresses. Starting off by launching my rocket plane squadron, you will see, and moving my carrier forward as is customary. You can see quite a bit of detectability on my carrier hull, by the way, as I pre-drop my first squadron, which consists of these TB2D Sky Pirates. Now you can see the arm distance is quite a bit longer than is typical, and you can see they have quite a bit of travel time compared to most American rocket aircraft, and there's quite a barrage. The Sky Pirate barrage is quite analogous to that of the Audacious, but unlike the Audacious, which has quite a bit of anti-destroyer capability, the long arming distance and the poor spotting capabilities of the rocket plane squadron overall, and including its inability to drop a fighter plane, make them relatively ineffective. The rockets do have 32mm of penetration, and with this build they have a 7% chance of fire per projectile. Each rocket has a maximum damage of 1650, which comes out to about just a bit over 500 damage per rocket. Now we see a Tier 8 Kansas, which happens to be covered in 32mm of armor, so this is going to be one of the best targets to display the potency of the rockets on. Now there are a lot of them per aircraft. You can see me descending with my massive HP on the squadron, but you can see the reticle is fairly large. Oh, and I do miss the strike, which is a bit embarrassing, but in spite of having this 20-second tax on being able to attack again, because I have so much HP, I should be able to do it. And honestly, I don't value the rocket planes that much. You can see someone is inside of the cap, but I can't really go after him. I do briefly spot him, but honestly it's not that helpful. So we made that erroneous attack, and we still have 6 planes left. You can see if you start the attack out from quite far, there's not too much time. That's about a launch there. You can see the angle is quite awkward, but a smattering of 17 rockets for penetrating damage does net us 9,000 in this case. The enemy is actually fairly weak on that side, so I'm probably going to just turn back over. My hull is spotted, which is a bit frightening, but I'm going to see if I can disrupt this enemy Buffalo. He's probably going to take the cap as I relaunch with these Sky Pirates. I cannot intercept even if I do drop a fighter because it's his last attack, so I'm just going to let him have it. Now the bombers are dropping the same bomb as the Midway, 4 bombs per payload, and they attack in, well, flights of 2, just like every other FDR squadron. The Buffalo's still pretty bow in. Now the bombs are not like regular USN HE bombs. They use the same bomb payload, but you can see the drop pattern is much more akin to that of the Audacious. This guy's almost not moving. And we score an easy double hit. I don't know who is talking. Oh, Xin Yang. It's interesting. Well, we'll see if he's outside of the smoke. You can see that 25-second arm time between drops is a bit inconveniencing. I'm gonna see if I can search for this Xin Yang. See if he's moved at all. Looks like he's left for the most part. So I'm just gonna drop. I had to pre-drop there because I'm completely blind, can't do any self-spotting. But I'm gonna continue to harass ships. Now I'm actually gonna favor this full health FDR1 because he's completely unsaturated. As I swoop in behind him, you can see still another 7 or so seconds before I can attack again. A lot of flak puffs to fly through. And while flak isn't normally a problem for most carriers, on the FDR it is quite problematic because my aircraft are so slow that it's actually quite difficult to do so. To dodge. Have to lead by quite a bit because of that Audacious-like drop pattern. You can see I have significant hang time, but nice 17,000 damage. I'm gonna get shot at briefly by quite possibly the Montana, not sure. And finally, I'm going to launch my torpedo bombers. My team is, however, advancing through the cap, got a fairly hefty hit. Spotted by those Manfred torpedo bombers again. Hopefully he runs out of them soon. He's been using them quite extensively, but on fairly light AA targets, this time on something, well, not very heavy in AA again. There is a Xinjiang here. Oh, that's actually a Rugmo. So again, like every other squadron, torpedo bombers are paired off. Just gonna drop this in advance to keep him from having too much room to maneuver. You can see it's a huge wave of 8 over here. This bulwark of the enemy team is the next stop to my team, but I'm gonna continue to harass that FDG squadron over there as I move my carrier back into position. Need to always constantly be doing that, just like any other carrier. Only a couple seconds left. These guys aren't particularly dodging, and you can see that massive 50,000 hit point pool as I push through this flak. Have the extended aim time on the torpedo bombers, not only because my planes are so slow, because you can do some pretty tricky stuff with them. I'm gonna just drop here. With that wide spread, you can see I'm already turning. Enemy carrier does respawn, but it's kind of too late. I did get the strike off already, and you can see that net of 8 torpedoes. Quickly scoring a flood. Come around now. During that long refresh time, and I still have 4 more packages potentially. Now, even though I'm not properly aligned, I can just start the drop now and make slight course adjustments throughout, and you can see the FDR's reticle doesn't really widen throughout this process. He's fairly committed to the turn, so I'm not going to get a perfect drop again, but I still have another 20,000 or so hit points on this squadron. Do score another flood. Just going to let him continue out to the border. Oh, there's that Montana. It's going to fly away. Not too much room to fly away, so let's see if we can demonstrate the turning strike here. So just arm and let narrow and punch through. Oh, nope. Not really able to do too much here because of the amount of room I have to maneuver, which is fairly minimal, but nothing too concerning here. Slowing up my hull, and that Kansas is now the leader there. Do manage to score 1 hit, and you can see just attacking battleships, which are the FDR's preferred prey. Very easily racking up quite the damage total. Let's see if we can make this jump, actually. Now, the torpedoes are quite clumsy, as you can see. And so from that, I should be able to quite confidently say that the battleships are basically what you end up going after in the FDR, because there's so much delay on her strikes, and because she still has enough penetration power with either torpedoes or bombs to go after battleships. That's her main target in most instances. There is a Xinjiang in the area, which slipped away, so I'm not too sure where he is. But my hull's not currently spotted, so he's not too concerning of a problem. Now you can see, even fully boosted, the airspeed of the squadron is only 166 knots with these twin-engine bombers. A fact that does not necessarily reflect their performance in real life, but is there for game balance reasons. You can see here this awkward turn of the FDG is actually making it quite complicated for me to line my strike up. Give him about a half ship's length lead, and that should allow the bombs to strike home into center of the ship. Fairly solid 60,000 hit, or 16,000 hit, sorry, with 2 fires. He's going to put that out. But you see I have to circle over if I want to continue to make a direct follow-up strike for an extended period of time. Kind of need to anticipate which way he's going to turn, probably out back toward the center of the map. And only now is my strike finally ready. Not really looking for too much of a hit. You can see even a slight turn will allow him to dodge the vast majority of my bomb spread. but I only really need the fires and a couple of bomb hits, 2 in this case. And now we have that wait period again. This time we can hover outside of AA range, however, so I'm looking at that Montana, if you could not tell. Just continuing to hunt battleships because, well, that's just what's available. This battleship heavy Deadeye meta is actually quite good for the FDR, I will say, all things aside. Whether or not that's healthy or not, well, that's for other people to decide. Leading almost a full ship's length in this case. And you can see, even just hitting the 5 bombs, still substantial damage. Neglecting the rockets really because, well, as I've mentioned, not particularly effective armaments in my opinion. And there's really nothing to it. This game in particular is not going to score very well because it's just all raw battleship damage. But that is the way the FDR has to play in some ways. You're just a supersized Saipan, and the Saipan is much better against heavy targets with relatively low mobility compared to lighter targets like destroyers. Due to the nature of her armaments. My carrier is beached right now, which is annoying, but not too much I can do about it. Again, the FDR not particularly useful in the air defense role. Especially with the fact that her slightly faster rocket plane squadron completely lacks the ability to make use of a fighter plane at all for allies. As I come up on this attack zone now, I'm gonna have to consider my angle of approach. Flick back out, you can see that flak briefly touching my squadron, but not being particularly effective. Probably gonna race alongside. And so what I can do here is demonstrate the strike alongside. I'm right on the border of the Thunder's AA, just racing alongside, letting the reticle, sorry, kind of close in the distance, and in the last few seconds of the strike, you can come in alongside and line up as a traditional method, or as I would in a traditional method, and now we got a nice, pretty clean hit. He really has nowhere to go. I think he took a torpedo, which actually slowed him down, which in this case is going to help him dodge some amount of my torpedoes. Kind of flying through multiple AA auras here. Montana coming in to clean up some torpedo hits too, and you can see that the HP is so large that I can just hover inside of AA. And that is going to destroy my squadron. I was mostly just hovering inside to demonstrate how tanky the squadron is. But that squadron had about 40,000 HP, so they were able to tank that double battleship AA aura plus that carrier hull for a substantial period of time, as you saw there. This team is throwing themselves at these battleships, so we are going to lose some ships, but this game is inevitably going to be a victory since the enemy team does control 0 cap points. There's an enemy carrier. The Manfred, by the way, does have only 50 millimeters of armor, so I could actually swoop in and kill him, but he's kind of so low on HP that it's not that beneficial. The next kill is going to end the match, so might as well just go in on this Montana. Who I believe took a pot shot at us earlier, and since I don't appreciate people making attempts on our lives, well, just to send a message, why not just dispatch him? Again, give him as much of a lead as possible, anticipate as best I can the path of his travel, but with that wide, Audacious-like reticle, not the best accuracy, and so we are not going to be able to finish the kill. But a quick Manfred kill will finish that off, and that is a very simple FDR game. Now, for me, the Manfred is pre-nerf at least, was by far more powerful carrier, and I actually prefer playing basically any of the other tier 10 carriers, Audacious included, over the FDR. I just don't find her to be very fun. The kind of sluggish nature of the armaments as a whole aren't very effective against many targets that aren't as large and slow, so you find yourself harvesting battleship HP, which is not a good way to win games and will, well, not reward you in terms of base experience. You can see here, 146,000 damage, but it's pretty much exclusively battleship damage. Have a little bit of damage from that Buffalo Strike because he was just sitting still and not dodging at all, but you can see the rest is all just from bullying one poor FDG, more or less. Now before we continue, I'm just going to go over our modules quite briefly. Slot 1, Air Groups Modification 1, Slot 2, Air Groups or Air Engines Modification 1. Nothing else to take there. Slot 3, I'm taking Torpedo Bomber Arm Time. You can see that the bombers are very slow, and the extra 5 seconds is actually very beneficial. Your torpedoes are extremely slow, standard American torpedoes that only do 35 knots. So the extra 5% torpedo speed that you could take if you take aerial torpedoes is only going to give you about a knot of speed, which I find to be not worth it compared to the extra 5 seconds of time, which allows you to be a little more creative with your drops. Slot 4, Bomber HP. Pretty straightforward there. The bombers spend a lot of time over the target, just like Audacious bombers. And they do hit the hardest of all your squadrons. Slot 5, Flight Control, just for the extra 2. Now, there is actually some merit for taking concealment systems, especially in this post-rework world, since the squadrons of the FDR are so large already, and you're not supposed to be losing them unless you kind of hover inside of AA like I did at that last section there, and lose aircraft on purpose. 23 to 21 aircraft with that 103-second restoration time is not so bad, but for now, this is a very standard safe module to go for, so that is what I'm running. And in the last slot, I'm taking plane HP. The planes are so slow that taking plane speed, which is a much more traditional module for slot 6 for aircraft carriers, is just not that beneficial. With a base cruising speed of 127 knots, adding that 5% speed is going to net me less than just about 8 knots of speed, which I don't find to be that worth it overall. Right now I'm running my Halsey. There's lots of ways to build the FDR, but I'm currently running this spec. So the standard 9 points of air supremacy into improved engines into armor and HP. And from there, probably bomber flight control. Now the FDR is a special case where she does actually end up taking some amount of flak, so enhanced aircraft armor is actually not a bad upgrade for her. There's going to be some amount of flak buffs which are actually literally undodgeable. So not a bad choice, but I'm going for a more offensive option, upgrading my torpedo damage. Now I have kind of slammed this captain skill in the past, but it turns out that my understanding of the skill was kind of incorrect because, well, it doesn't really spell out what it actually does. Rather than cutting torpedo protection by a flat 10%, it actually goes deeper into the damage formula and does some wonky things. So what this does mean is that it basically just adds 10% flat torpedo damage. So it's just a flat damage upgrade, so you just take it. And then I round out my build with Demolition Expert, which doesn't look very good, but remember when I'm firing those rockets, each of the aircraft that fire rockets fire 26 rockets. So you end up firing just about 52 rockets per target. So this Demolition Expert skill is pretty decent for trying to guarantee fires from the rockets when you need them. And last but not least, because the squadron is so large, I would traditionally take Last Gasp, but it's kind of useless here on the FDR, so I take Improved Engine Boost for a bit more engine boost duration. The engine techie for the 20% cooldown reduction is also decent, although I would argue it's a little better on German carriers with that extra charge. So not too much to say here. Just gonna send her out for another round since that match was kind of easy. Hopefully we can get some carriers in the queue soon. And there we go. So the FDR is a steel ship, unfortunately, so you can only earn her through, well, earning steel through competitive activities. Looks like I have some other people in my division, which is interesting. But anyway, as I was saying, Steel ship, competitive resource, so most players are going to be pretty pressed for steel, myself included. I did obviously take a while to accumulate enough to actually get the FDR. But as for whether she's worth it or not, it's kind of a hard statement to make. She is quite expensive, I believe 33, maybe even 38,000 steel, so not exactly a cheap ship. And as for her playstyle, well, you really only do one thing, and you farm battleships. In this game, there's gonna be 5 for me to farm, this Deadeye meta kind of contributing to that. So right now, she's a pretty good pick, but if you're looking for your first competitive steel ship, for me at least, I would recommend the Stalingrad as a first-line ship. That's just my 2 cents. Just scouting here. Now normally you would scout for destroyers and cruisers and such, but in the FDR you're just scouting for your first victim. That Minotaur is actually somewhat attractive to hit because he's so thin-skinned that outside of his belt armor he takes basically full damage from the rockets. As well, spawning him for my allied battleships is quite frightening for a lightly armored ship like the Minotaur. Now I do have to get quite close. The rockets hit at about 2 kilometers out from the target, and I don't have that much in terms of arming distance. So arming at about 4 kilometers should allow me to rake the top of his superstructure. We're going to see if he's going to turn at all any further. You can see I have to barrage fairly early though, and even with that wide spread, launching 52 rockets, we only land 5, which deal, well, basically minimal damage. I'm spotting that Petropavlovsk, circling outside of the AAOR again. Every squadron, as I mentioned, has that 25-second reset timer, flying into that flak buff. It's a pretty heavy flak zone here, so there's not too much else for me to hit. That Minotaur did leave his smoke after, and we did some glancing damage. That Petropavlovsk, you can see, is parking himself into a fairly dug-in position. Now he has a lot of allies nearby, but with a squadron with basically more HP than a Des Moines, 64,000 HP on my fully equipped and fully armed FDR squadron, I should be able to get in there. Excuse me. It seems to be a pretty obvious drop toward my exposed Yamato, so I'm just going to drop a fighter and inconvenience that guy. Petropavlovsk moving into a fairly suicidal position. The Petro is tanky, but not that tanky. He's going to have to stay bow in, so he's not going to be able to turn full broadside in front of my whole team. So it should be a fairly easy strike. He also has his AA off, which is an odd choice. Maybe accidentally press the P key while he's trying to maneuver. Doesn't appear to be moving very fast either, which is odd considering his current predicament. You can see that large reticle making me miss a large amount of my bombs, only hitting 3 out of 8. And I'm circling needlessly here because remember we have that 25-second reset. We'll see if he even survives till my next reset. I normally wouldn't hover this close to him, by the way, but as we said, he has turned his AA off for some god-awful reason. Looks like he's turning fully to a stop. You can see the squadron is quite sluggish. Another 3 bombs for 8k, pretty much the same as the Midway, but much less accurate and much less versatile. Montana also pushing in. My teammates are probably going to dispatch him, considering the crossfire he's in, and there he goes. There's that Montana making a full turn in front of the cap zone. There's a fighter up there, which is kind of unattractive. Fighters are one of the few ways you can easily dispatch, and I do need to start working on the other side. The fighters are one of the few ways you can easily dispatch FDR planes. I still have 10 planes left in the squadron. But there's just no target here. He is a pretty attractive target at this stage. Kind of bow in, not moving very much. I'm gonna see if I can fly my planes back over this cold bear. You can see they're so slow, they have a hard time dealing with that fighter. And he's probably gonna just pick up 4 of my planes here with that 4-plane fighter squadron. Still fairly dug in, trying to get behind the mountain, but not too much I can do there. Might be able to get 1 bomber in with 6,000 HP left in the squadron. You can see each individual plane has still fairly good performance. 3,000 HP. Didn't score a fire there, by the way, but what can you do? There's no need to really watch this, but you can see the accuracy is poor. And now we start on this side that we have been neglecting for a bit. We did drive our carrier over here, but they're not particularly winning. Part of that might be because they put 2 battleships onto the side. They are now pushing in though, and there's that Petro, which should be in a fairly static position, so I can take advantage of that. He has to bow in toward those 2 battleships on the side, which should allow me easy access. Pretty interesting fighter, maybe to cover a destroyer there, but I'm not actually there for the destroyers, so a little awkward, I would say. Arm the strike now. And I'm gonna push through some flak, but you can see it doesn't really do too much to the overall health of my squadron. He's moving forward now. And the torps are very slow, remember 35 knots, so probably gonna miss the majority of that. So fly out and away. He's immune to damage at the moment. Do score 1 hit, 2 hits, 3 hits. Not too much more than that though. Circle around for another pass. So you can see FDR does a lot of circling around in general. Again, like that Thunder at the end of the last match, we can dive down and use our 15 seconds of aim time to swoop in on a target once we've got the reticle quite narrowed, which is something you can abuse quite readily. This guy's gonna have to turn or he's gonna have to beach. One of the two, so neither option should be attractive, so we'll see what he chooses. There is, however, quite a few ships here. Oh, looks like I misled. Only gonna hit him with maybe 2 torpedoes. I'm obviously not gonna make another attack here, I'm just staying so we can see what we hit. Kinda useless rockets here. But we have a lot of them right now, so we'll give our other squadrons some time to regenerate some health. You can see, even with that 5% increased time, we chew through our health quite readily. And we have some kind of clusterfuck, by the way, back there, involving Yamato, Montana, and Petropavlovsk, so thank you, Deadeye Meta. Very healthy for the game. My 2 cruisers are pushed up more than 12 kilometers in front of 2 of my battleships, which is, well, it's That's really all there is to say about it. Well, since I cannot encourage my teammates to make proper decisions, one way to help your teammates along is to, well, kill everything in front of them to force them to move forward, because they need to be killing something, right? Lots of flak here from the Minotaur, not usually a problem for many carriers, but for the FDR, definitely a problem. We don't want to adjust our aim too much once we arm the attack, you'll note, because the reticle does widen quite readily, aiming for the superstructure, but really, you're just aiming for the whole ship when you're using FDR rockets, and you can see between the 32 rocket hits, we did manage to score 1 fire. Zoom out and away. Although zoom is a bit of a strong word. for what the FDR rockets are capable of doing in terms of mobilizing and repositioning. Get out of the 6-kilometer long-range AA of the FDR. And we have enough planes and plane HP left in the squadron to make one further attack. You can see this damage versus the Montana is relatively ineffectual. There is a Minotaur inside of the cap. Gonna have to make a bit of a swing. And you can see the strike area is quite wide. At this point, shower him with another 18 penetrations, but the 18 penetrations did like 7,000 damage, so not exactly great. I may in fact have to put my own body into a cap zone, to be quite frank. I am spotted. There's a Yamato across the map at this position here, so that's a bit frightening. Not exactly effective versus a ship like the Minotaur here. Remember, we have that hang time. You have to kind of anticipate where he's going to go, possibly. Do get some decent hanging. See if my Worcester can trim off some of this fighter squadron before he decimates my ships, or decimates my planes, and looks like he did manage to protect me from a lot of that damage. So my teammates dispatched the Minotaur. Myself, well, I didn't do very much to him. There is a like 2 HP Montana, so hopefully they kill him. What should I do? And there's a Zhao that should be pushing away. Zhao AA, not particularly impressive, so I'm gonna take my time, try and get a better strike in, and protect my Worcester, who is very low after taking those Minotaur torpedoes. Take another flak buff, but as you can see, not particularly heavy damage. Gonna have to do a bit more predicting. And wow, okay, that was a pretty good RNG roll, I would say, overall. There's an enemy carrier over here, by the way. But we are finally gonna be able to take the cap. Not too much in the way of squadrons that are available, so I'm just gonna go for my torpedo bombers. And my battleships that were on the backline along with that Petro are still on the backline, so need to start going back to the other cap now that we finally secured this one, I think. Even if this Colbert that survived with the Worcester. Okay, are those 20-kilometer? No, there's a gearing in the center of the map because there's a gearing in our cap. So we'll see where he is first. The FDR is incredibly not great versus destroyers, so this is gonna be very not pretty. Pushing versus the gearing in particular is not gonna be a very fun experience for me. I can guarantee you that much. I'm gonna spot him for the Petro at least, so that'll help defend the cap. Drop some torpedoes behind him, encourage him to dive into the island perhaps. Alright, so the Petro is inside his reload cycle. We push him out of the cap. I'm hopefully not in danger, but it's hard to say of these things. He decides to finally turn on his AA, but I have so much HP for him to work through. There are the gearing torpedoes for the Petro and not me, which I'm pleased about. I'm not pleased, however, to be a spotting bitch. Not in a random battle, but you can see how in a competitive environment, even if I can't harm this gearing directly, I am basically just gonna perma-light him until he smokes. He has no choice, he just ends up opening fire, and at this point I don't even have to light him anymore. I can, however, make it difficult for him to operate. Force him to slow down there, and now I can ignore him again for a little bit. This is of course because he did open fire. And now at this period, just fly over back to this Yamato here, which doesn't have great AA, with this nearly full squadron. My Kremlin is pretty backed up, so I'm going to see if I can help him with the most threatening of the ships, which is, I don't even know, maybe the Montana, maybe the, probably the Yamato starting in this position. You can see me flying through multiple outposts there. I'm gonna just take my carrier into this position, to be honest. 5 bomb hits there, some pretty hefty damage. Petro does dispatch him because he got caught in that crossfire. My Colbert is making mincemeat of that enemy carrier, which apparently wasn't really launching aircraft, or if it was, not very effectively. I saw someone on my team did earn an AA defense expert. I believe it was the Colbert, so that might have something to do with it. Midway does finally go down. We did score that fire on the Yamato, which we know has been damage controlled. Now the Yamato does have a fairly substantial torpedo belt, so I guess this is one situation where the bulge protection skill would always be quite relevant. Just gonna punch through. He doesn't have that much room to maneuver. We'll see if he turns in to respond. 15 seconds on my arm time. Let's try and score some floods. I can't see. Not a great angle on the Yamato still, so we're just gonna fly through and actually attack the Montana. Any extra torpedoes might hit the Yamato. Go over this mountain. Score 8 hits there. Fly just outside of the AA range. You can see the Montana is not flooding, and now there's 2 perfectly lined up targets. Can't see, but I'm down to just rockets now, so this is kind of why I went for the reserves, even though you have fairly large squadrons. Get a reflood onto something. Not sure if I hit the Montana or not, but it's ticking whatever it is. And you can see this kind of mind-numbingly straightforward, but effective gameplay versus battleships. Now that I'm back on targets that I can hit quite readily, really is effortless. Rockets, not quite as impressive. Okay, you can see having a mountain there kind of screws my reticle, so just gonna dump onto that. Yamato, not a great angle obviously, but I'm gonna hit some stuff in. I do manage to score a pretty lucky fire. Fly back out. Now it's just the Yamato's AA. And I should be able to hit a follow-up strike on a DCP-less Yamato. Swing the planes around. And here we go. A bit early on the launch, so hopefully I'll be able to get the range right. 4 seconds. And I have enough rocket alpha in this case and hit enough rockets into the bow that I dispatch him, but you can see, not very impressive as I solo cap this. And yeah, at this point the gearing's back in my home cap, but we have secured their home cap, so who cares? And we fly over. This ship is honestly mind-numbingly boring. We are going to win, but probably going to just tick this game out because my planes aren't even going to cross the map to spot that Petro. I might spot it briefly for about 20 seconds, but I doubt we're going to have enough damage to take out even a 17,000 HP Petropavlovsk, so it's going to be a bit of a rough one. He's still running, by the way, even though the game's about to end, so really not too much to say to that other than, well, welcome to the World of Warships player base. Gearing def is kind of going to expedite the win, but it's not going to do too much. My brief spotting does actually manage to get that retro one-shot, and that is going to be that. 180,000 damage this time, but again, not impressive for the FDR since it only hunts battleships. So 180,000 with a confed over 19 torpedo hits, 28 bomb hits, 97 rocket hits, 6 planes shot down, 2 planes by fighter, 5 incaps, 2 kills, 7 fires, 2 floodings, and assisted capture. And I expect to not be at the top at all because this ship is frankly kind of terrible. Pretty impressive to have 4 people in the 2000 base experience though. But yeah, there you have it. That's FDR. Now people say this ship is pretty imbalanced and it's definitely broken, but is it good? I don't know. Like honestly, I do prefer the MVR and Midway, especially for random battles, so more on that another time, but that's just kind of our intro to the FDR. I figured I might show it off. I've had it for a little bit, but I haven't really put out a video for it, so there it is for now. FDR on patch 10.1. I'll catch you guys later. Cheers.